We're good? Okay. So this is the Homebrew seminar, and it all started when I was a little kid and I liked to build stuff. So, but before to do that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Darrell Darby. I'm one of the founders of the Louisville Electronics Homebrewers Club. So, and always have just like to build stuff as a kid. So I got a ham license, and I've been around electronics. In fact, I made a career of being an electronic technician, and it was a good ride. Still like to build stuff, radio related and audio related stuff. So I have a little slideshow presentation here, and it won't take too long. And then we'll move into kind of like questions and answers. And I will also a little promotion here for the Homebrewers Club. We meet a couple times a year, and I'll pass around a sign-up sheet, just your name and your email address, or if you want to put down your cell phone number, that's fine also. And I'll put you on the mailing list for the Homebrewers Club. It's pretty informal, no dues. It's really just pretty general projects. They don't have to be radio related. They can be electrical. We do motor controllers. We do all sorts of things. All sorts of interesting. It's like a science geek show and tell. It's all pretty awesome. Very laid back. So my wife certainly makes refreshments and stuff like that. So it's a pretty good group of people. So we have fun. But if you want to be a part of that, we meet in my shop, and we just it's a good time. So I'll pass around this sign-up sheet if you're interested here, and I can put you on the mailing list, and if you want to come to the meetings, you're certainly welcome to. So, okay.
Do you meet any particular place or just over the internet?
We generally, we'll have like field trips, field days of field trip. Actually, this is an unofficial homebrewers, lots of homebrewer people here today, and but we meet in my shop most of the time. So, and I have, very fortunate to have test equipment and a nice place that you can bring your project and show it, and so it's real laid back. We're all very friendly, very helpful. So, one of the things I have a picture of here is a radio I built, and it's a 3-band regenerative tube receiver. Okay, so it's kind of one of these things where I had stuff laying around. And I thought, I'll build something. And my sort of passion is driven toward older designs with tubes and stuff like this. So I have a lot of these parts just laying around, and I thought, well, let's just put something together. So, and it's sort of a replica type arrangement, but I built this particular receiver to cover the 6 meter, the 10 meter, and the FM broadcast speed. And for the most part, it's a pretty interesting receiver. It's band switching. It uses a set of headphones. It's got nice little features. It took me quite a while to do it, maybe a couple months or something like that. But it was a fun project. It turned out really well. So. Some of the other things we do lots of different types of projects. This is my own version of a solar panel controller. So when I operate, I generally like to operate pretty close to the QRP type power levels. So I have a couple of these solar panels, and so I needed to build my own solar panel controller. So I put together one. So this is my example of the easy to do, build it yourself solar panel controller. So, and you may have questions about some of these projects. How can I do this? Where do I get the parts and stuff like this? I'll be glad to help you. I have a lot of extra parts, and I'm now at the point to where I have so much of this stuff, I'm actually giving stuff away, which is good. People that like to build, I'm very encouraging to try to get you to, find the same self-satisfaction in building something, accomplishing, that it's just a really good thing.
Did you homebrew the panel? The solar
The
panels?
solar panels, no, I bought the solar panels at the Dayton Hamfest years ago. And another friend of mine, Bill Latta, he bought a panel, and now he passed away, and I was gifted that panel. So I have both panels, and I use them. They do relatively well to charge batteries. Running radios directly off the panel takes a little. It can be done, but it takes a little bit of investigation. I built this radio project. This is 80 and 40 meter tube type transmitter. I built this project specifically for the AWA straight key night, which was a long time ago. And I had, there again, I had all the parts. So I decided after reading a few articles, I would put together my own version of this transmitter. Now, all these parts came from old military radios that I had taken apart as a kid. That's how long I saved stuff. So everything was just laying around, so I thought, this would be a pretty interesting project. The transmitter works really well. I made it so it sounds really nice on the receiving end. In other words, when you transmit, how you're judged is by your signal quality on the receiving end. So this puts out a nice CW note. It's not chirpy, doesn't dance all around to the frequency. Somebody that's trying to copy your CW signal here is going to really like that. They're going to say, that's I'll send that guy back a response because evidently.
How many watts is that thing?
It's about 5 watts. It's nothing really to write home about, but it gets the job done. Here's one of the projects that my son and I did together. This is an audio amplifier project, and it is built as a headphone amplifier, and it's built in the 1930s general radio style. So it turned out really well. It has a copper-lined mahogany case, and it's a nice sounding little unit. And we had a lot of fun building this together. My son did the majority of all the wiring and the parts placement and stuff like this, and I was sort of along for the ride. It was a great project together. So,
where'd you get the case?
This case is actually a jewelry case. So I got rid of the top and the case that said, it needs a purpose or a home. So basically I converted it over to audio amplifier case. So, and the parts I had, there again, I had those laying around. So now this is a little transistor radio. It's 2 transistors, and it produces speaker volume. I built this for a radio contest for one of our homebrew meetings. And this particular radio runs off 2 batteries. And when I do stuff like this, I like to make sure that it's easy to see the elements of the radio and also how the project was put together. So you can visualize how this produces enough volume to power that little speaker. It's not real loud, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to work relatively well. So these other projects here, excuse me, I'll show you that in a second. So, and that's the inductor which I wound on just a piece of PVC pipe. Or excuse me, that's a toilet paper roll paint, and there's a piece of PVC pipe that moves in and out of the toilet paper roll to get the unit to operate. You see, this looks really hard to do. Actually, it's not hard to do. If I could do it, it ain't hard. So, okay, so that was a real interesting radio to build. I had a great time. That was a pretty quick and easy project. It took me about 2 or 3 weeks or so.
So were you a broadcast engineer?
No, I was just an audio technician.
Audio side.
Yeah, I had a really good run. I had really good audio mentors, and I still mess with a lot of audio. On the right is an IKEA clock. Go to the IKEA store. Clocks are $2.50. So I bought a couple of those clocks thinking, $2.50 clock, why not? So then I run across a website that has all the naval faces of the clocks. So I thought, that just happens to be the right size. So I built that clock on the left, basically out of the clock on the right. So it was $2.50, you know. And it makes a nice radio room clock. This is what you see on board ship. And you'd see, you know, obviously the radio operator on ship has operate times, and he has, where he cannot operate, he has to listen for distress calls. And obviously you can tell green is go, red is stop, so you have to listen in these particular areas. So the radio room clocks are all gonna have similar little, and that, for me, that's a homebrew project, you know? It's something interesting to do. It was real low cost. I just printed it out on a laser printer, and it was pretty cool. So they said, you can't build a one-tube radio. I says, yes, I can. That's the challenge. It says, oh, you can't build a one-tube radio? I said, yep, no problem. So this was another one of those winter projects where I'm down in the dungeon, in the shop, messing around. I thought, you know, I move this part over here, move this part over here, and I think, you know, if I put that part with this part, and then I build a box, I got a radio. That's what happened here. This was a real quick and dirty and easy project, and if anybody could identify, you know, when I was a kid, I used to go to the Radio Shack and buy these little red P-box kits, and that's what this radio was. So I decided, you know, that P-box needs to be modified. It needs to become a real radio, you know. So that's what I did. I took that and used that basic platform to build a radio. Over there on the left, you'll see a black 35 millimeter film case holder. There's a tube, some controls. I put furnace tape on out there as a kind of a shield to keep your hand from untuning the radio. And this was a weekend project, really easy to build, you know. So also I like to take radio way back to its beginnings. And the beginning of radio communication all started with spark transmitters. So I built a replica spark transmitter, and I've taken this to a few of the other radio shows. So I built a nice little display, and I get lots of people that are very interested in early radio and how it worked and spark. And now I put together, I have the pieces, what I'm going to put together is something to listen to this. This produces a radio wave, okay? Early spark transmission produces radio waves that's used on board the ship more than anything else. But I'll build a receiver for this so that people that, when I'm demonstrating, gets people to put on a set of headphones and hear how it works. This was a great project. This took a little longer than some of the other projects, but most of the times when I display it, I end up with a pretty good results. All the members say this is a nice project. So I got my ham license in 1974, which makes me a 50-year-old hammer. My dad really sort of got me started. And my dad built this radio in 1946 after he got out of the Army. And this is really what I learned to listen to ham radio, basically all sorts of shortwave stations on this radio. Now, did it look that good in 1946? It looked pretty good, but it didn't look that good. So I took my dad's radio completely down to the chassis, took all of his notes and his drawings, and I recreated what he would have built if he had had the money to do it. You know, he was sort of kind of operating on very much a shoestring budget after getting out of the Army. And this is a simple super heterodyne receiver out of the 1946 ARRL handbook. And it works really well. And I kept all my dad's notes and documentation and rebuilt it to where I think my dad would be very pleased with it. Now you say, gosh, it looks like a train wreck. Well, it very, very much could be for 1946, but this was sort of the way things were done. This is sort of the state of the art back and then. So not to change its under the chassis appearance, I have replaced a lot of these parts with little covers that make it look original. So I tried to sort of kind of, you know, keep its original appearance. This is how my dad would have pictured it. You know, back then I had, you know, chassis up rebuilt, had it all torn apart, and it was pretty much a great project. It took quite a while. Also, what home brewers do is we build stuff, so it doesn't have to be, you know, I love building antennas. It's a great way to start out to home brew your own stuff. You know, you just have somebody, just find a friend who has an antenna analyzer or something like that, start messing with antennas. This particular fan dipole is an offshoot of what Jim Hykins, where's Jim? Raise your hand. Jim Hykins built. Very successful, he likes it, okay? He's made a couple for other people. And so when I talk about home brewing, I'm not necessarily talking about just building radios, just building audio stuff. I'm talking about all aspects of just building something, you know?
Can you transmit that?
Yeah. This works really well. I built a version that works on 40/20 and 15 and 10. This is 80 through, is this 80 through 10?
86.
Yeah. Well, okay, yes. Some of them can make them 80 through 6. And antennas are black magic to me. They're such a marvelous, you know, area that we all think that we know something about, but when we get them up, they either work or they don't. And then you got band conditions, and you got operator, you know, you got to be familiar with your radio. So it's really sort of the ultimate challenge is get the antenna to work, get it up high enough where it's going to work, and then hope you can sit down in front of your radio and find somebody who isn't watching TV or on the internet. You know, I can make a contact.
Just a few parts like PVC pipe and wire you get at Home Depot.
Yeah.
You can get some SO239s out there, and I use mine almost every day.
Yeah.
It works well.
Yeah, so homebrew projects don't have to be necessarily super complicated. They can be relatively easy to construct. Here's Jim right here. Actually, we're working on the 6-meter antenna because the 6 meters was on fire. What I mean by on fire was really open, so I decided to get him. He's pointing to his homemade balun here to decouple RF from the antenna.
Yeah.
So we got this little guy. So building stuff is just fun to do. So here's the gosh, these are really popular now. These type of antennas are really popular. I haven't built one yet because I haven't found the core that I want to use, but these are really easy to build. These are in-fed antennas, and you got a little balun here, a little impedance matching, and you know, these EFHW antennas are, you know, I would not discount them. They're very portable. They work really easy. They're super easy to build. You see a lot of them now that they're selling kits that are ridiculously priced, and a handful of parts you can make this antenna. So, okay. One of the other things I did was I recreated out of a Radiocraft magazine. They had an article about how to build a shortwave receiver, and I thought, you know, this is too cool not to build. So what I ended up doing was finding a radio dial and finding a box. You know, it's sort of like, okay, I got the radio dial in a box. Let's build a radio around all that like cool stuff. So I built this little radio, and I built it without a chassis. And he said, well, why don't you build a radio and not put the parts on the chassis? Well, the whole idea was when you open up the lid, you want to be able to see what makes the radio work. So I built it sort of above the chassis. So all the parts are sort of kind of spaced out like on a breadboard, or how we would build it out to experiment with. And I thought, well, why not just show it off inside there? If you got a metal case, it's not going to affect where the hand capacitance and all those things you worry about. But this is a real performer. It works really well. The detector's up in the upper left for stage audio, is mid-center top, and the speaker output is one tube right here, and it powers the speaker. And it uses plug-in coils. You use coils up here, here, and here. You can just plug them in for different bands. It works really great. So I had to have a power supply to operate it. So I took an old computer power supply box, and I gutted that, and I put in my own power supply in that box. I'm a real good repurposing thing. One of the other great things about homebrew is thinking, I got these parts, I need to put them to work, to use them. Or I look at something, when I'm at the Hamfest here, I'm looking at stuff from a totally different perspective than a lot of people do. I look at that and say, you know, I can make something out of that. That would be a really good thing to buy, and that's a future project. Now, granted, I'm old. I may not get to any of these projects, but up here, I've already got the project started in my head. So okay. So you said, what the heck is that?
World War II?
Well, funny that you mentioned that, because I also deal with clandestine World War II spy radios. I have a few, and like this, so I kind of collect them. So, and I study about the English SOE and how they dropped the agents behind in France and stuff like this. I read about it. It's all very fascinating. So I decided to build my own spy radio. Now the whole idea is, okay, so you take a chair, you got to hide this radio from being, because in certain countries during World War II, it was, you either the Nazi Gestapos would pick you up if you were not allowed to own a radio, because you would be receiving broadcasts from the BBC and all this stuff like this. They didn't want any information being able to be sent. So you weren't allowed to own a radio. It was a trip to a concentration camp if you were found with a radio. So I decided to build a spy radio. So I did a lot of articles, research, and stuff like this. So I took a chair, and I thought, and then we actually had a contest to see, other members are going to build their spy radios, and we had to figure out where they were. So this is my idea here, and this is the bottom of the chair. You flip the chair over, this is what you would see. Now there's a possibility, if you get somebody who's smart, I'll say that's a false bottom to that chair. But when I made, I took a lot of these things, and the radio fits. Bolts underneath, right, the radio itself bolts underneath the bottom of the chair, and it takes 30 seconds to remove the radio and 30 seconds to put it back in place. So if you heard somebody trying to get into the building and the apartment, you have about 30 seconds to hide the radio. So, and the other deal was, I can't build this radio with modern parts, or I can't build this radio to be super great. I have to build it with parts that were available like in 1940. So then I had to do a lot of research, okay? So my headphones are ex-World War II Navy headphones. All the parts you see here, most of all the parts you see are what would be available in 1940. So that was a great set. In fact, I've had people come and borrow that spy radio to take, and they got this little platform and presentation, borrow to their other club meetings. They want to show the radio.
Did you win that one, or was it Star Trek?
Mike and I always were off either first
I
or
know
second.
it was.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll talk about Mike here in this week. He's one of my mentors. So this is another one of the projects that my son and I built. It's a audio headphone amplifier. This one actually sounded really good. So you started out with a PC board. I like to label everything so I don't get lost in midstream here. Because a lot of times the fun thing about building stuff is I'll work on it and I get frustrated. I'll walk away. I'll go do something else. And I'll come back and an idea will snap into the head. I'll go back. So I go back, but if I don't make good notes, I have to start sort of like at square 1.5 and figure out where I was. So I make notes. I get revision notes and all stuff like this. It really works out well. So when you build something that's going to be an involved project, keep really good notes, stuff like this. So this project turned out to be excellent. It's a nice headphone amplifier. It has an excellent sound. This you might recognize as this is a radio I built out of an old World War II transmitter that you would find in a B-17. So I took the case and I thought, this is I can't throw this out. So I decided, I'm going to build a radio out of this. This is a one transistor regenerative radio, and yes, that's a toilet paper roll.
Yeah.
It's just painted black. They're very convenient for coil forms.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just wind some wire on it, find out where you want to be, and then you basically put together a radio. And you say, well, how do you put together a radio? It's a piece of cake, you know? You got a one FET and I improvise with other parts. The little module that's sort of vertical over there on the front. I literally took an AM radio and took a saw and sawed out the audio amplifier out of the circuit board and just stuck it in that thing because I was too lazy to build my own audio amplifier. I thought, all right, let's take a saw and just sawed it out. I thought, well, I know where the power goes in and the audio comes out and all something like that. So I just, you know, I could have Velcroed it inside, but I thought, well, I better mount it. I mean, somebody might look at this thing and think, well, you could at least mounted the audio amplifier. But, and it works great. It's a great little 40 meter radio. So this is one of the audio project I was building, and I like Western Electric. Just the whole story of a Western Electric and how it evolved, and a lot of their parts, and a lot of their stuff. You know, I was gifted from one of my mentors. Here again, I got parts. I want to build something. So this is an electronic crossover for stereo, and it's basically this device goes between your stereo and your subwoofer, and it's tube type, and it looks a little bit like a train wreck inside, but it performs really well. So not visually, as far as its performance is stellar. Really works well. But when you get inside, you say, what the heck was this guy thinking of? So anyway, it was a great project. It turned out really well. I still use that today. Some of my other
Where's
projects.
the toilet paper roll? I didn't see it.
No, there's no toilet paper roll. That's a good point. So if you look at this thing, you say, what is that? Well, you used to be able to buy Bose wave radios.
Bose there.
Yeah.
That is that black assembly on there with the two speakers on it is actually a speaker cavity out of a Bose wave radio. So what do you do with a Bose wave radio that's been hit by lightning? You just chuck it in the trash can.
Ovation.
Nope. You don't take it in the trash can. You take the Bose wave radio off, and then you build a little tube amplifier, stereo tube amplifier, and you make a Franken Bose multimedia tube type amp. And then you connect it up to your computer and you go, oh gosh, what is that? That's a unique multimedia amplifier.
What's sound quality?
Oh, sound quality is what you would expect out of a Bose wave radio. It's mediocre at best.
No highs, no lows.
It must be a Bose. That's the old audio. That's what we used to laugh at. You know, so because that's an old audio technician. You know. But I mean, and then I made a little blinky light underneath of it to drive people absolutely nuts. They says, I love that project you made, but that light's got to go. I says, nah, it stays. It's there just to annoy people. So. And when I operate and when I build stuff, it's generally a chaotic situation. You know, I got crap everywhere, you know, so I can walk away, but I feel comfortable with all that stuff, you know, right at hand's reach. I can pull this out, pull that out, you know, and, you know, there's nothing scientific here. This is all just hit or miss, you know. I do my research, follow my ideas. Now, granted, I made a living at doing this, so I may have obviously an advantage to it. But for the most part, here's another audio amplifier that I modified for our friend. And this is a small little speaker amplifier. It's a pretty expensive little unit. He liked it so much, you know, when he passed away, he gave it to me. So I thought, well, you know, it's a very nice tribute. So this is a picture of my outside shop. This is where we have the homebrew meetings, and so if you bring something and we want to plug it in and test it, a radio or whatever, amplifier or something like that, we can do that. So when it gets cold, I go down to the dungeon, which is in the basement. You know, so I have another shop down there. So, and let's see here, I've got there we go. This is another little project I'm working on right now, and you've heard about you know, people trying to figure out, well, I got all these parts, how do I put them together to make them work? Well, it's a piece of cake. You find a piece of wood, you buy these little terminal strips, which you can buy here at the Hamfest.
Yeah.
You just screw them down on the board. And then you've got tie points that you can tie all these components and parts together. I mean, it won't look good, but the idea is to get it to work. And once you're happy with the way it works, and in this case, the way it sounds, then you think, okay, I'm gonna move it from that stage. This is after I've been making all my notes and everything as I go along, that stage into a finished product. That's what it takes a long time. So I'm really good at that. The finished product where they look aesthetically pleasing, you know, it's okay. I mean, if they'll turn out all right.
Don't forget the toilet paper.
Exactly. Don't forget the toilet paper. Right, exactly. So this is another example of just a little experimenter breadboard. And you know, if you wanted to get into home brewing and circuit building and stuff like that, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money. I mean, all these things can be had here at the Hamfest for a little or nothing if you know what to look for and where to look for. It's not that difficult. So this is a typical IC experimenter. I took a saw and sawed it in two. Moved it out to the side, put a tube socket in the middle. Now I have a little platform that I can experiment with tubes, which I kind of like that older technology because it's so much fun to work with, recreating the past on it. Now I put it right in the middle. Now I can just plug in components and make easy, quick and dirty evaluations. So now this I just made for my grandson. You know, so he's 4 years old, and I can tell he gets a good potential to be a wires person. You know, a wires person is a hands-on person, home brewer, likes to fix stuff, gadgets and stuff like this. So I'm encouraging gadgetry here. So especially a light bulb, a rheostat, a motor, buzzer, bell, and a switch. And I used to use, you know, something similar to this. I used to do for when I worked with the Scouts. I would build these boards and give them to their patrols or groups, and I'd say, okay, we're going to have a contest. I'm going to draw a diagram here on the wall, on the chart, and you have 5 minutes to build a circuit. First group that builds it wins the prize, you know. But you have to turn on the light, you have to ring the bell, you have to ring the buzzer, you have to get the motor to run. So I'm doing this with my grandson, and he likes it. He's got little clip leads, and you know, I've modified this to make it real easy for little fingers that don't have super dexterity to do all this. But he loves it, so it's a really good work in progress. What do you do with an old computer case? You know, put a new computer in it. You know, yeah, that's what most people do.
That's what I do.
I don't. You know, I figure, well, you know, all of my projects need power. So, and you know, the kind of power that I need for my projects, you just don't plug them into the wall. You need power that you can turn up or turn down, or control, or have some idea. So, took a computer case, took all these other pieces like a Variac, and made my own power controller. Look at that handle on top there. It looks like you'd steer the Titanic with that.
Yeah.
Below the handle is a big rotating variable transformer that turns your wall power up and down as you need it. And you got a little power monitor there to tell you, you know, everything you just basically need to know what's coming out of the black box. So, and that's just, and you know, I'm old now, so it's too heavy to lift. So I put it on casters and it just rolls around. It's like a little dog, you know, okay, I've got a project going over here. I just roll it right over, you know, plug it in, works great. So, the back of the computer I whacked and hacked out and put in some outlets and stuff like this. It's all part of homebrew. It's all part of taking something. You develop something out of nothing. Something that would just be disposed of. You know? So in my ham radio station, this is my HROs. There's a couple of receivers that I really like. These are, the one on the right is made before the war, the one on the left was made right after the war, but these are sort of like the pinnacle representation of what you would use during it. The British had intelligence operations where they had a lot of people in the country listening as much traffic as they could, radio traffic, on these HR receivers, and they would have groups that would be formed to decode messages, and it was very highly organized, and these are the receivers they used. So they're just, and they were still just really excellent receivers. My little AM station, I have a transmitter in the middle, and that's a tube-type receiver. Little station monitor, speaker, amplifier up there, right home about. And there we have the infamous Altoid scan.
What receiver?
Oh, which one? Over here. This receiver up here. This is an R390.
Oh, yeah, that's-
And it's a really nice tube-type receiver. This is a E.F. Johnson transmitter. It's a tube-type transmitter. It's about 75 watts or so. It's, you know, but these two guys working together. Here's sort of the speaker I have with the station. He works really well, and I don't want to rant you and stuff like this. This is I'll show you this in a minute, but this is my novice transmitter I built in 1974. So it's now 50 years old. And I recently updated it. This is the infamous Altoid scan.
Right.
What do you do with an Altoid scan?
Oh,
It's steel,
yeah.
it snaps on them. It's the perfect building platform for all types of radio projects. I mean, you could build...
And audio.
And audio. You could use QRP transceivers, transmitters, little tiny antenna tuners. Altoid scans are really just super little, you know. This one is a device that if you put in 1.5 volts, I get 45 volts out. 45 volts at 5 milliamps. You say, well, what good is that? Well, tubes work on much higher voltages. So instead of buying all these batteries to operate the tubes, and if you want to do a battery tube experiment, this is a little converter for that. So just a, you know, little project. So one of the founders of the Homebrewers group was Jack Bell and Bill Lev. So Bill just passed away. He was 104? 103 years old. Bill's
January.
yeah. Bill's a fantastic guy. He was very philanthropic, gave you a lot of stuff, set a fine example for other builders, and he was a big, you know, initiator trying to get this home brewers idea going where, you know, ham radio can be a whole lot more fun if it's hands-on, you know. So if you want to build stuff, come and see Bill. So Bill roped me into a meeting. Of course, I got sucked into it because I like to tinker with stuff. And then Jack Bell was another one of the founders, and he was a really excellent member. He worked for Western Electric, and he taught me just a whole bunch of things. Now
Bill could actually
Oh,
receive, he could pick up and decode CW at 60 words a minute.
Yeah, it was 60
Never-
words a minute.
He said it was, he used to teach it, I think during World War II.
Yeah, he used to copy in his head,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
in characters and entire words.
Yeah, I tried listening to that, I couldn't even make anything.
Here's a battery set that I bought that was about half done. We bought this at a radio meet, and I looked at this and thought, you know, I know what he was trying to do. It's a shame he didn't finish it. So I finished it for him. Put my labels on it, and it's a really nice set. I took it to one of the radio meets and found it a new home. Simply because, you know, it's when these things are, maybe I got too many radios. Maybe I need to give a few of these things away. So it found a new home, and the owner of it's very tickled. He's very, very happy with that radio. This is the coils used for the radio. Each one of these coils represents a specific frequency range. There's an antenna coil, and basically an oscillator coil. So this is what I was talking to you a little while ago. Inside the computer case, I built a power supply. This is a tube-type regulated power supply. Most of the comments I get is, why do you have a tuna fish can in your power supply?
Why not?
Well, tuna fish cans are basically plated steel. They're steel. So the transformer on the lower right there it's got lines of flux. It generates an AC field. And it was interfering with my tube power supply there. So how do you solve that? Well, you reduce the lines of flux. You cancel that field. And so I just soldered the tuna can cover over the top, made a cover for the transformer, soldered it over the top. Voila, perfect. Not a single. Nothing to write home.
And he had something for lunch.
So, exactly. So, and I had tuna for lunch. Yeah. So So I made this power supply to power all of my tube type projects. I thought, well, you know, why build a power supply for each one of the projects? Why not build a universal power supply that powers most of the projects that I would build? So that's what I did here. You know, a universal power supply. I'm only going to use one project at a time. You know, so it just made sense to me. So here's basically this is a mobile rig, a multi-OMAC rig, and I wanted this because I had one of these as a kid and never really got to use it. You know, I had it, I was going to install it, and in one of my junky cars I had as a kid and never got around to it, and I gave it away. Well, I found somebody else that gave me one, so I basically rebuilt the receiver, got it to work, and I still have it today. It still works really well, you know. So here's a friend of mine helped me make this. This is I also built crystal radios. I mean, why would you want to build a crystal radio when you could build one of those super duper fancy radios, you know, like you have in some of the other. Well, a crystal radio is fascinating because it uses so few parts, and yet, you know, this is the detector. This is a piece of galena, you know, semiconductor inside of a little lead base with two terminals. Radio wave comes in, sound comes out, basically, to simplify it. That's oversimplified. Okay, it's a detector.
Where'd you get your galena?
Yeah, right, exactly. And you tickle the galena to get it to work with a little spring-loaded device on top.
Yep.
It's
Point
you know,
contact, they
yeah,
call
point, exactly. That's exactly right. It's point contact. So with Mike Starcher, we made that, and we made a coil. And this is basically, you need one more element here to make a really nice crystal radio, and that's it. And that is a tuning capacitor. 1, 2, 3, and you're listening to radio. You know, connect it to your ham radio antenna. It works great. You know, so. The other things is this is a radio military set that was on PT boats, and they use this. The Navy use it a lot. I got it going, part of it, and then I sort of lost interest in it, and I found a new home for it. So, but here's a typical example of a crystal radio. You know, if you're starting out and you want to build something and you want to impress the neighbors, build a radio that works for free. And this is what this is. No batteries, nothing. So you'll get your toilet paper roll out, you wind a little coil, you get a capacitor out of an old radio or something like that, you get a little thing over here sort of in the center, maybe a little bit off to the right, it's a dye detector, and you connect it to a special set of headphones. They say, where am I going to find those headphones? No problem. I'll make another set of headphones that will work with it. And it worked great. Now you can leave this thing playing 24/7. Just leave it playing on the table or the bench, and people go, what's that noise? What's that? I hear a radio going. You know, and they walk over and they said, what's that sound coming out of those headphones? I said, that's the radio, it works for free. It's been playing like that for, you know,
Years.
It'll never stop playing. You know, so there you go. You can tune it in, if you're local here, you can tune it into WHAS. And on this particular radio, on some nights when there's no interference and the atmosphere is just right, our layers are all cooperating, I can hear, I've heard WSM in Nashville. I've heard the Grand Ole Opry on this radio, believe it or not. So it's really fascinating little set. Here's another radio I built for one of the crystal radio that I built. It has its own detector, galena detector. And it's called the Mystery Set. It's a very easy set to build back in the 20s, so I decided I'm going to build one because I got all the parts. So we have, that's kind of out of order. Let's see here. This is another crystal radio built by the Miller Company. They made coils, and to show how good their coils were, they came up with this little kit, a little high fidelity tuner. It's basically a fancy crystal receiver. So I got one of these gifted from one of my mentors, and he said, doesn't work, and I said, you can have it. I said, fine. So I rebuilt it. Now it was one of these things I had to recreate a couple parts. I had to recreate this coil here, and I had to work this particular coil here to get it to work. And it took some tinkering, but I got the little stuff to work, and this is probably and I built a lot of crystal radios. This is probably the best performing set I've ever owned. I mean, I can hear stations all the way across the United States. So on this project here, this is a guitar amplifier. I built it for my son, and it's like a practice amplifier. It's not something that you use, but you wanted to basically, you can plug a line in or plug a microphone in. Works relatively well. It is a 3-generation project because my dad built sort of that amplifier for my son to practice when he got his first electric guitar. Yeah, first electric guitar, and it's set, not used for 30, 40 years, and I pulled it out and I thought, well, I'll fix it to a way I think my dad would have liked to have finished it if he got around to finishing it. So I finished the project for him.
How many watts?
It's probably 15 watts at the most. It's not a real loud amplifier, but it's a nice little practice amplifier. So here's a ham receiver, Hammerlin Ace SP600 that I was repairing, and I got it to work to where I'm pretty happy with it. So I now have moved it out to the other shop, so I use that for general listening. So this is my ham receiver, hand transmitter I built in 1974 when I was a kid, and I had a lot of mentors help me on building this. And you say, well, in 1974, if you're a novice, you can't operate on 160 meters. Well, they made me put 160 meters on this transmitter simply because the older guys that back then said, okay, you can put 160 meters on this because when you upgrade to a higher license, we'll be able to communicate with you on 160. So they kind of give me a little nudge. But your first novice transmitter, I don't know about the rest of you, but it all looked like train wrecks. But this is my second novice transmitter. So all these guys got together. These older guys got together and made sure that this transmitter, by giving me the parts, and basically the whole hand holding through the entire process. And recently I just updated. So now you'll be able to take this transmitter and connect it up to any receiver. And it's really very easy to use. The spare crystals are sitting here in the little rack. Plug in a crystal, it's got antenna switching, it'll mute the receiver, it has speaker if you wanted to use it for AM on 160 meter Reg 2 QRP. It's got a little modulation transformer, screen grade modulation, piece of cake. So that was a nice project. So I call that my 50-year transmitter project. Here's our homebrewers meeting, and this is where we were giving Bill Latter, one of the founding members of the homebrewers, his 100-year certificate. Bill was very, very happy to, and it was a great meeting. Bill was a great guy. So I'm also a member of the Mid-South Antique Radio Collectors. We have a meeting coming up here in
October 26th.
Right, in Lexington. We go to that because, along with ham radio, also have an interest in antique radios. Radio's radio. So, and we're back at the beginning. So I'll pass this, if you want to pass this around, if anybody wants to put their name and email address here, and you want to be on the homebrewers mailing list, I'll pass that around. Just write your name down there, and I'll put you on the mailing list. We meet a couple times a year, and when I have time, I'm on grandparent patrol a lot of times now, so I get a lot of times with that. That's a great job. So, but for the most part, if you want to, we get together. Like I said, it's very informal, and you want to be on the mailing or the email list, I'll be glad to do that. So, if you're interested in home brewing, it's not as complicated as you think. You basically just, for example, you come to a meeting and say, well, I want to build a crystal radio. And before you leave the meeting, I'd have all the parts you need, right? And just give them to you right there. So the deal is, it is really very satisfying to create something out of nothing. So you look at all these things and you say, well, you know, wow, I guess this is all gonna go in a landfill or this is all gonna be thrown away. But you know, I look at something and I see, not necessarily a finished product, but I see something that's functioning. So, but for the most part, it's a very rewarding offshoot of ham radio and antique radio collecting. So, now does anybody have any specific questions?
Do you, do anything where you substitute transistors for tube circuits? Like take old tube circuits and make them transistor?
I have done that in the past, but I have a tendency to stick with the tube circuits simply because I just like tubes. Yeah. So, yeah.
I've built 2 homebrew antennas and turned a computer power supply into my radio amp.
Right? Yeah.
Radio power supply.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great building projects like that, isn't it? Yeah, it's just, you know, it's very, I like it a whole lot. Okay. Any other questions?
What kind of antique radios are you into besides
Well, I have
ham?
anything from a few console radios and some table radios still left. Well, I had at one point in time, I had a really large collection. And, you know, there was at least 50 radios, maybe 75 radios. And over the years, I've sort of thinned the antique radios out, simply because, you know, I just don't, you know, have the room for all of them.
His wife was complaining about all the space.
Well, actually, I'm there, yeah, I've been married 43 years, very, very fortunate. My wife's a saint.
And you wanted to make it to 44.
Yeah, I wanted to make it a 44.
You ever run across a Zenith chair set?
Yeah, well, the guy you need to talk to is sitting right there in front of you. Jeremy is one of the leading experts on antique radios, and she's sort of my sounding board. When I see one, I'm always thinking about, well, you know, I don't have room for it, but he needs to buy it. So I'm like the bird dog, you know. I'll find it for him. And say, boy, you really need it, and I'll put the sell on it. I'll make sure you know the deal didn't go south. So, yeah. So, anybody else have any questions? Okay. Well, thanks for attending. So.